Welcome to the Female Finance Collective podcast, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about all things money.
I'm Jen, and I struggled for many years with debt and feeling financially overwhelmed, so I know how frustrating it can be. Now I'm passionate about helping women confidently take control of their personal finances.
And I'm Meri-Li. As a financial planner, I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of women who've transformed their financial lives. I'm excited to share my insights to help you on your financial journey.
Hey, I'm Sybil. I built my dream life traveling the world and creating financial freedom on a teacher's salary. Now I help women take charge of their money and burn brighter in life.
Let's start the money conversation.
Thanks so much for joining us today. So, we're going to be talking about debt today. And I feel like it's one of those financial topics that really creates strong feelings for people. And I'm going to start with sharing my story around debt because this started in my 20s. As I was going through school, I took a lot of credit cards just to pay for the day-to-day living expenses. And once I landed my first full-time job, the income was not stellar. And suddenly I was faced with student loan payments and quite a bit of other debt. And the way I felt about debt, it was this overwhelming thing in my life. I thought about it a lot. I totaled the numbers up very often, and it made me feel sick. I was uncomfortable even opening paper statements. So back then, everything came in the mail. I would just let those pile up. I knew what my payments were, but I just didn't like looking at the totals. And I hated debt so much that I made the decision to move back home. And it took me about 6 months of really scrimping and using all my extra money to pay that debt off. And once it was paid, I started to kind of make those decisions, those adult decisions. And one of them was, well, where do I live now? And that led me to exploring home ownership, saving for a down payment. And then suddenly there's like this evolution that happened. So now debt becomes something that can be a very useful tool for purchasing a home. And home purchase is scary. It's a big amount of debt that you're taking on, but it feels a lot more useful or purposeful than the debt that I had before, which was mostly just to cover life expenses. So I think the biggest thing we wanted to share is debt does not have to be bad, and that there is an evolution that you can have with debt, your relationship with it, and how you feel about it.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to be talking today about like survival debt, right? Which is what you were talking about at the beginning, that many of us have, earlier in life or sometimes continuing on. And then like strategic debt,
Yeah.
how we can actually kind of turn the corner and use debt strategically to help us meet our financial goals or to buy that house that you want to buy, things like that. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that, Meri-Li. I personally have been really trying to figure out how to use debt strategically at this point in my life right now, in both my personal life and my business. Um, and it's hard because I think we have a lot of this bad baggage and this mindset, kind of that it's bad, right? That debt is bad no matter what, even though I realize that there's some really smart ways that I can use it, knowing my history of making full payments every month, being able to track my expenses and income. Therefore, knowing and trusting myself really to like take away the emotional aspect of debt and just looking at it more like transactional, right? So it's like, okay, if I'm going to try to change my mindset from debt is bad to debt can be my friend and I can use it strategically to build wealth, I'm going to need to make sure that I kind of take out that emotional baggage and that I pay attention to the numbers and just stick with the plan, right? We talk a lot about that on here on our podcast, is like making a plan and sticking with it. And I think that's probably the most foundational thing you need to do when you start to make this transition. You want to buy that home, you want to use debt in a way that is strategically smart. You're going to need to let go of that emotional piece and make it a transactional, well thought out plan, right? So you can follow it and carry through, because the last thing you want to do is start using debt strategically and then not making payments and falling into a trap of paying high interest and it not working out, the numbers not working out the way that you had planned, right? So there's a lot of planning that needs to go into that mindset shift of, I'm actually going to use debt now to help me get this house, to help me pay for a new HVAC system, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the reality is it's pretty hard to go through your adult life without taking on some sort of debt.
For sure.
So, most of our purchases, they do get financed, those larger purchases. So car loans, mortgages for your home. And then beyond that, you mentioned, business borrowing can be a great way to use debt to your advantage to build your business at a faster pace. Because if you have to save up for kind of the next scale opportunity for your business, it can take a long time. So debt can help you to build your business faster. So that can be a wise use of debt. So, really that shift debt is not bad. It's actually useful for building your net worth or building your business, and just changing the way that we look at debt, because it can be helpful. And
For
some of those
sure.
advanced wealth builder moves would be to use debt for business, to use debt for perhaps a second property, maybe even borrowing to invest, depending on risk tolerance. There's all these kind of advanced moves that you can make. Sybil, how are you using debt now?
Yeah, so I've been working on kind of two main areas, two main things right now. So starting with my personal life, we bought this house a year ago now. Yay, I can't believe we've been here for a year. Um, but we knew that the water heater was very old and the whole HVAC, our heater and our air conditioning system, was all going to need to be replaced. Relatively soon. You never know when they're going to go out, but we knew that they were old and that was going to be a big expense. So it's happened, of course. The water heater went out first, and we ended up paying $3,000 for a new water heater for our home. And that we were able to use our emergency savings to fund. And so that's how I funded that. And then what my plan is for that is to kind of put in a little bit each month into my emergency savings to refill that, right? And so that's how we paid for that 3,000. And then along comes we decide, well, let's start like researching and looking into and being proactive on this whole HVAC system, because we don't want it to just like go out and then you end up paying more money often when it's like, I need it today. It's 100 degrees outside and my air conditioning's down. You end up paying more. So we were like, let's be strategic and start learning and investigating and finding out how much things cost. And then we got this incredible offer to actually upgrade to a heat pump for our air conditioning and heating system, which normally to replace all of that in the US right now, it could cost 15 to 20,000 US dollars. And so there's a lot of rebates right now for more, eco-friendly and modern heating and cooling. And so we were able to get a whole new heat pump to replace our HVAC for $7,000, which is a lot of money, but it's a lot cheaper than going another way, right? When they break. So we were like, if we want to do this, how are we going to fund this? didn't really want to take another 7,000 out of our emergency savings. And so what we decided to do is to use debt in a strategic way to pay that $7,000 bill for a new heat pump. And so what we did is we have a really good, both my husband and I have really good credit scores because we pay our credit cards in full every single month for the last 20, 30 years, right? And so we opened a new credit card that has a 0% financing option for 14 months. We put the $7,000 charge on that card. We got a $300 bonus for opening a new card. And then I divided out the remainder, so $7,000 minus the 300. I divided that out by the 14 months. So I don't want to pay any interest on that amount. But by doing that, our payments were like $408 a month versus me taking out $7,000 straight out from my emergency savings. Now, what that means is I've just made a commitment to pay $408 more in my budget every single month for 14 months, right? And so that is an example of leveraging debt, but I'm still going to pay no more than $7,000. I'm not going to pay any interest. And so I'm going to need to stick to my plan. I've got it all calculated out. And that is a way in my personal life. Now, what just happened is we found out we had raccoons in our roof. And so we had a critter control come over, and there's another $2,000 expense. Like, oh my gosh. Another 2,000. Do we pay it out of our emergency savings? Do we tack it onto this credit card at 0% debt and then add that on and then divide by 13 months now, because it's a month later. And so that's the decision we decided. But it was interesting for that to happen so quickly because I think it's just like spending on any other way. You're okay. Like we became okay with leveraging this 0% interest for the 7,000. And then it's like, okay, let's put another 2,000 on. Okay, let's put it, we can't put any more money on there because now our monthly payment's going to be up to like 450 or 460. I need to do the recalculations. And that has to come out on top of all the other expenses and everything we have budgeted every month for the next 13 months, right? So that's one way that I've leveraged debt really recently, the last month, in my personal life. And then in my business life, we have some short-term properties, rentals, that short-term and a long-term rental. And our short-term rental has quite a bit of equity in it now because we've had it for since 2014, so I guess 11 years. And so that equity, I'm starting to wonder, how can I use some of that equity? We don't want to sell the property, but how can we use that equity, that money that's sitting there that like actually the FAFSA in the United States, the college kind of federal funding, looks at as money we could spend on a college education, which we can't unless we sell the property, right? And so we have these big college expenses over the next 6 years. And it looks like we have a lot of money, which we do if we want to sell the property, right? But right now we don't want to sell the property. So I'm starting to explore like how to use a HELOC on that equity, right? And so to borrow from that equity to make the equity go down, but also to leverage debt to buy another property or to invest in the business in some way. So I'm looking at using debt in both my personal life and my business life right now in those ways.
Yeah. That's great. And I like how what you've done is you've considered the net worth impact. So you've had a look at what your equity is and kind of what you had in an emergency fund and factored that in as part of the decision. And then you looked at your cash flow. So when you're taking
Yes.
on new debt, just understanding what the future cash flow is going to look like and how long you have to make those debt payments. Because if you don't take that step, then suddenly you can find that your cash flow is very tight and you end up taking on other types of debt to cover day-to-day expenses. And those other types of debt, like credit cards, are super expensive if you don't have like a set negotiated balance transfer or purchase option. Um, I have for myself, I have to make a big decision with my house. So I'm going to be moving in with my partner full time. And so I have my house, and the decision is that I either sell it or I rent it out. And I've been doing lots of calculations, and the pure mathematical win for my specific situation is that I will do better with both cash flow and with net worth building by renting out my house. And there's a few reasons for that. One is the market to sell isn't stellar right now. So I don't think that I'll get a price that's kind of anywhere in the range of where it has been in the last few years. And then there's always commission to sell. So that's an amount that goes away right away. So commission, real estate fees. I have to break my mortgage, so there would be a penalty there. So there's a lot of, there's a large amount of money that just evaporates from
Yes,
the
that's a
sale,
good word for it.
just gone.
Uh-huh.
And then in terms of the other option, so I could, if I did do that, I could take the money and invest it. And the rate of return I'd have to get to, like, kind of to equalize the scenarios was really, really unrealistic. So I think I'm not quite there. I'm going to think about it. And with big financial decisions, you want to give yourself some time to think about it. Make sure
Yes.
you've considered all the angles and how it impacts other parts of your life. But my thinking is I'm leaning towards renting. I can get good cash flow there and kind of have a few years to decide. A rental property is work.
Yes.
It is not passive. And so what I'd be taking on is kind of the risk of, if you don't have a great tenant, that can be challenging. And then it's also continue to own that house with living somewhere else. Suddenly there are two houses that can have things like raccoons
Yeah,
or
exactly.
repairs.
HVAC breaks.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is like when it comes to housing, it's really hard to predict some of those repairs, but
Mhm.
just sometimes what I'll do is when I walk around the house, I'll just say, how old is my furnace? How old is my air conditioning? Just
Yep.
kind of think through the bigger stuff and just state of repairs, like what looks like it's going to need to be repaired and kind of the time frame, and writing all of those things down or putting them
Yes.
into a spreadsheet of potential things that can go wrong. So yeah, so that's, that'll be new for me in terms of using that house,
Mhm.
keeping the leverage, keeping the borrowing, and using debt to facilitate that that rental income.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I've been using ChatGPT a ton to help me make these decisions because you can give them all that data. It costs this much a month, all of your expenses, how much might I bring in a month? What if I have no tenants for 2 months, right? That's all like rental risk. And then we can think about, you can ask them questions of how else could I do it? Could I make more cash flow if cash flow is your goal short term? Can I make more cash flow doing it a different way? Should I do short term rental versus long term rental? And then what is my HOA? What questions do I need to look into, right? And chat can say, check to see if your HOA allows short term rental, for example, like ours here does not, but our property in the mountains does, right? And so it's amazing how much AI can help us do this investigating and figuring out too, so we can ultimately make the human decision, but we can look at it from so many frames so much quicker now when we use AI as a partner too. So I don't know if you've done that or not yet, but I've been doing that like crazy, just asking questions about the situation and what should we do and what other options are out there, and that kind of thing. Because ultimately, to use debt as a leverage point, you really need to, like you said, do your investigating, do your planning, ask lots of questions, look at different ways it could go, what's the pros and cons. And then you do have to take on a little bit of risk, and you got to make sure that you're comfortable with the level of risk you've decided to go with.
Well, I think, yeah, so couple of points. So I do use AI sometimes for financial workups or decisions.
Yeah.
And I have professional financial planning software as well. So I always find it a really, really interesting exercise to
Uh-huh.
see where there are similarities and where there are differences. I do find the one thing with AI is sometimes it can be really time consuming to weigh some of the factors and the decisions, and like the results you get are very quick, but sometimes you go down rabbit holes that
Yes.
get very complicated. So
True.
sometimes it almost adds more content or overwhelm to the
Complexity.
situation, more complexity. But I do find it helpful. So I'll ask about my situation, you know, lots of different scenarios that I've been playing around with. So it's been really interesting to use it and then to compare it to the software that I use and kind of compare the results. So that part is, has been very, very interesting. Um, I was going to say something else and I've completely lost my train of
Lost
thought.
it.
I lost it. And it was great. It was great.
Oh man, maybe it'll come back to you.
It'll come back
Um,
to me.
but yeah, I mean, it's incredible we have these tools like at our fingertips now, and AI is kind of trained or programmed to give you a positive response. Yeah, that's a great idea, right? You love it when AI tells you that's a great idea, but then you have to really critically think. Is that the
Yeah.
great idea, or the next one they gave me, or the next one they gave me? Because every idea
Right.
they give you is a great idea.
I've noticed that because I'll have it run something and I can tell the math is off. So I'll say, "Are you sure about
Yep.
this?" And then it'll say, "Actually, like I'll say you forgot about this part." "Oh, right, we did." And it kind of recalculates and recalibrates, which
Yeah,
is fine. So you have to have like a base amount of knowledge to discern between, kind of what the parameters are and what is correct and what is kind of way off.
for
I
sure.
I remember what I was going to mention
Oh,
is,
good.
and you articulated it well by saying it's kind of a human decision in the end. And one of the things I keep thinking about is I'm turning 50, and the part with the rental property, the part that I'm not sure about is like, do I want to be a landlord for that property? And
Hmm.
do I want it to be something that I have to worry about? So, when I'm retired, do I want to be in another country, relaxing, doing whatever I want to do, and then have this property to worry about and take care of if something goes wrong? And I do notice with clients, like there is this tendency to divest of properties as people get older, because you want to shrink your worry list as you
Uh-huh.
get older and reduce complexity for most people. Not
Yeah.
everyone, but for most people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the one piece where I wonder, like, do I want the easy solution to just sell,
Hmm.
and be done with it, invest the money and let it do its thing, or do I want the complexity of having the mortgage and renting it out and all that entails?
Yeah, for sure. And that's so good to journal about, to think about, to talk about with others, what are others doing, and to really, really consider, I know, like I've been able to remove myself from emotionally from the condo. It took me years,
Yeah.
but once you can make that, it's a business. But even still today, I was, chatting with someone who wants to rent it for the next couple months in the fall. And you still catch up in that emotional piece. And like, am I pricing it right? Am I right? Are they going to be good tenants? So even though like I'm pretty good at looking at it as a business now and letting it go, you're absolutely right. It's still there. It's still like, I've got to cover this mortgage plus hopefully make a little bit more, right? Um, it's still definitely there as a business, as it should be, I guess. If it's something bringing you in, there really aren't any like totally passive. Unfortunately, the American government looks at short or rental properties as passive income when it comes to taxes. And I just want to say, you don't understand. The algorithms on Airbnb are always changing. Like it's somewhat passive, but it is not completely passive. And when you're talking about the worry part, which is real, mental health is so important. It's really not passive at all because you got to cover those expenses every single month. Um, right? Because you're not living there. Otherwise, you're going to need to sell it. So you're absolutely right. Like really thinking about that mental aspect of what you
Yeah.
want now and in the future. And knowing, like you said, you could make a different decision in a year or two. What the decision you make today is not, you can give renting a try. And if you can't get long-term renters or it's a total disaster, you can make a different decision to sell it. And we don't know what the market will be like in a year. We don't know. It could get better, it could get worse. And
Yeah.
that's what we have to just tell ourselves and be okay with.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I know about myself is I tend to be more anxious. So I tend to think about things from lots of different angles. I tend to, be a problem solver, critical thinker. So I'm thinking ahead, like, okay, what could happen here? And so that part, that's the difficult piece of financial decisions is really when there's no perfect solution. Like I like neither solution is optimal.
Yeah.
So it's picking the one that fits best now. And in the province that I'm in, the landlord rights are not very strong. So
Okay.
there's this complexity that
It's really something to consider.
it's something that's big to consider because once you have a
Mhm.
tenant, it is very hard to get them out.
Got it.
So that can impact my timeline for other future decisions. It's an important consideration, and so there's no perfect solution. So,
Yeah.
stay tuned for what will happen there, but it's just something that I've got to decide in the next month.
Yeah, and hopefully this conversation has helped you get some of it out and will help your considerations as well. But we really always encourage you here at the Female Finance Collective to talk about these things with people. These are huge decisions, not only your partner who might be directly involved in it, but also your kids, things like that, but also just friends who aren't directly involved in the money aspect of it, right? And just talking it out because I think it gives our brains space to make these harder decisions a bit more comfortably.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we started this conversation talking about debt
Yep.
and that it is not all bad. So, definitely without debt, neither one of us would be talking about these decisions or alternatives
Exactly.
that we have. So it definitely can be a way to leverage and increase your net worth faster. Of course, anytime you borrow, it works in reverse. So, it can also have a bigger impact on your net worth to the negative if things do not go as you expect. So the risk element is bigger when you're borrowing.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully this episode has helped you kind of reconsider if you're in a place that it makes sense to reconsider debt as maybe not a bad thing, but could you use it strategically? Could you let go of some of those kind of societal norms and processes and use it to your benefit, right? So we really appreciate you listening. We would love for you to subscribe, like our channel, share our podcast with your friends and family, and Let us know in the comments below how are you using debt? What's your mindset around debt? And we'll see you next week.